Okay, well,
What?
your own.
Okay, this week we pick up with Shemot or Exodus 23:17. Literally in English, it says, 3 times in year he sees all male you to faces the Lord Yahweh. All right. The first word is shalosh, and that literally means 3. A meme, which is literally times. It's to tread the foot, hence a footstep, again and again, used for the word now. It's like putting one foot after the other of cadence. That's where they get time from it. Left, right, left, right, left, right. The passing of time via that cadence. That's where all that comes from. Again, Biblical Hebrew was an archaic language. In an archaic, it's not the right word. What's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. I'm too upset over all the equipment failures this morning. Primitive, that is the word. It's a primitive language, and primitive languages tend to use a lot less words because they take their fewer words and give them a lot more meaning. It's very vastly different than English. We use a lot more words with a lot less meaning. Anyway, so it is pretty much the utter opposite. So that's where you get all of those different ideas from the same word. Then it says Ba Shana. Of course, Shana being year, Ba is in year. So 3 times he takes these steps, he marches somewhere, if you will, he walks to this place, and then it says Ye Ra'eh, which is from Ra'ah, to see. It's said of those who face a king. It's said of his ministers, his courtiers, uh, those who are received in the king's presence. And the reason why they do that is because in the day, way back when, the king had a scepter. And when you walked in, if he did one motion with the scepter, you were taken out and killed. And if you did another motion with the scepter, you were allowed to go up and be in his presence. So to see the king was to live. So anyway, all of that comes from that same idea. To see the face of God is to be admitted into his presence, if you will, to enjoy the light of living because he didn't kill you. That's to bring God down to an earthly deal, but they use it to make people understand it. They don't try to bring God down to man, but they do use those terminologies to help man understand God who's way above man. They're not doing it to bring him down, but to help us understand because he's too high. The word is also to be taught in visions because back in those days they felt like when you had a dream it was from God that had some kind of meaning and blah blah blah. Um, that was folklore. That, by the way, that wasn't something the Bible taught them. It's just something that Mesopotamia taught this group of people. It all pretty much comes out of that culture. Probably said everything that needs to be said there. Then it says kol, which is all. So they use the word all, everything, those kind of things. Then it says zechurcha, and that's one of those sound-alike words, zechar. And you've heard me say this before. We were trying to remember Hebrew words early on, and my wife came up with zechar is in the garage, and so we will remember, right? That's the joke, but the word means to remember. But this word is literally zechar, but it means young men. And it's even used of animals, a young bull as opposed to an older, more mature one. So then it says el, which is properly a noun indicative of motion, which is a difficult thing for people in America to understand because the verbs are the motion words and the nouns are not. But in Hebrew, they don't really have nouns and verbs. We've uh, attached the ideas of nouns and verbs to their world, but it doesn't actually exist in their world. So the noun, this one in particular, is indicative of motion. So, but it is a noun indicative of motion. Then it says pene, so it's to turn the face. To turn the face. Properly, the part turned toward anybody. Like I said, from here to here. You turn oneself in any direction. You know, because you're going to turn yourself in the direction of this place that you are to turn oneself in order to go anywhere. Hence, and that's literally what's being said here. Then it says ha-adon. So the place is to the ha being the definite article, the adon, the Lord, the master. It is used of a possessor, an owner. This is something that's very much lost on the Western world today. I think it has a lot to do with what the Western world did with slavery, because there was a time when people could see themselves as a slave, and it wasn't a bad thing. And for the Christians, they really ought to get this more than they do, because Shaul, the guy they call Paul, he talked constantly about being the servant of God and God being his owner, his possessor, his Lord. But that's lost on the Western world, and the idea of being owned and possessed by somebody, it becomes more of a allegory than a reality, because yes, God owns me, he's my master, but he can't tell me what to do because I live by grace, right? I mean, think about what's being said here. God, the God who created us, gave us breath, taught our bodies to breathe without us even thinking about it, gave us dexterity with our hands and a mind to imagine and create. That God who created the whole universe just so it would support the life on this planet for us and the animals around us that he also created, that God has no right to tell us what to do because we live by grace. I mean, think about it. That's what the whole foundation of that is about. And I'm seeing it in Jewish circles as well. They're starting to live by grace and not by God's law. God doesn't have the right to tell them what to do anymore, because the way they do it in Judaism is, well, it's a living, breathing document and it changes with the ages. No, it doesn't. It changes. And these are the words that came out of God's mouth. That will never change. It is not a living, breathing document. It's the words that came from a living, breathing God who does not change. So when we get that idea and realize that we are the servant of the ultimate master, we better learn that whatever he said to do, we better do, and whatever he said not to do, we better not do. So if he said that we have to show up 3 times, we better show up 3 times. And that's exactly what's happening here. If he said to wear fringe, you better wear fringe. If he said to put a blue ribbon in it, you better put a blue one in it. Don't sit there and give me the man-made excuses as to why you don't have to do what God said. Because if you don't, and you say you serve God, then all you serve is a God that you created. And that's the commentary for today. The next word is Yahweh. And that's why I'm being so straightforward here, because this is the ultimate Lord. This is the ultimate owner and possessor of our soul. We'd better do what he said and forget about what the sages, the rabbim, and whoever else said. We better do what God said. All right, translation. We're in Shemot 23:17. 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord Yahweh. And here again, Rashi writes that the 3 feasts are to be attended during the sabbatical year. And the reason why he's doing that is because the arguments popped up real early on in Judaism that, well, the whole year of the sabbatical year is a Shabbat, so we don't have to do this on that year. And so he had to write, yeah, you do. That's a shame he had to do that, but it's a good thing he did, because at least most Jews follow that. Cassuto argued that the word Adon was used in antithesis of the Canaanite Baal. I couldn't disagree with him more. This is the one thing about, I love Cassuto. Believe me, I love everything that the man did. I wish to God I would have met him while he was still alive. I didn't hear about him until, recent times, like a year or two ago. Didn't even know about the guy. So I'm saddened by that because I would love to have had some long-winded conversations with this guy. But the one thing that he always did was try to make God reactionary. He believed that God somehow was stuck in this box that God himself created and couldn't get out of. And that bothers me. God was not doing antithesis to Canaanite. God was just telling the truth. And the truth is the truth, regardless of who it's antithesis to or who it's not antithesis to. The truth is just the truth. God's not stuck in a box. He doesn't have to do things limited to that which we know in our natural world. I'm sorry, that's the one thing I won't agree with this man. But most everything else I will. This guy was really something. I mean, scholar of the highest degree. He also said there is no mention here of the day of blowing the horn, the Teruah. By the way, you guys realize that next Wednesday is a holiday, right? It's a big feast, so Wednesday night we're going to be having the thing at 7 o'clock. Just a reminder there. Thank you very much, Athena, because I didn't even know it until the other day. All right, so anyway, there's no mention of the Feast of the Teruah or of the Day of Atonement. Both of these things are coming right up. But the silence is no proof that these days had not yet been instituted, because obviously, because there's no mention of it, there are those who try to say, well, see, it didn't exist at this point. Yeah, it did. God never changes. If we're doing this now, this is the way it was before we were ever created. That's all you really need to know about that. But he went on to say, because people say that this day wasn't instituted in this early period, our passage deals solely with agricultural festivals akin to the agricultural feasts of the Canaanites, and this is not the place for extraneous matters. So, he's on that same line. God is stuck in a box and can't do anything outside of it. And he's doing this in antithesis to. No, this is one of the few times you'll hear me disagree with this man. But I disagree with this man. I think that it just is what it's supposed to be when it comes out of God's mouth. All right, so verse 18. Literally in English, it would say, not slaughter upon leavened blood, sacrifice me, and not he stay abundance, feast me to morning. Boy, and if you do it very literally, this sometimes is hard to understand. All right, so the first word is lo, which is not. It's the negative article. So what would be a negative to? Zibach, slaughter. And that's all you really get. It's the slaughter of an animal. Then it's all, which is upon. So you're not going to slaughter an animal upon something. Now, of this particular word, Casuto said this passage clearly shows that the word all in such circumstances signifies with. Again, we're putting English words into something that doesn't belong there. In Hebrew, you don't need upon or with. You don't need a distinction between the two. I'm glad Casuto points it out for those who don't understand that small little thing, because that's what he's doing. Is people are like, oh, it says upon, it doesn't say with. So that changes everything. No, it doesn't, because upon and with are the same thing here in Hebrew. Not in English, because I've already told you the difference, right? One uses few words to have lots of meaning. The other has lots of words that have little meaning. Very different concepts. Then it says chamatz. Well, that's the word for leaven. That which is leavened. That which is gained by violence and wrongs. So what are we talking about? Like some of the sages and even Yeshua talked about the leavening of the perushim. And it, by the way, if you hear a sage or a rabbi talking about the leavening of the perushim, you're listening to a perushim rabbi. You're listening to a Pharisaic rabbi. Because they didn't correct others as a general rule of thumb. Now, they did, and particularly as you come closer and closer to our time period, it becomes more, after the 1200s, all the niceties and politeness between them was gone. But before all of that, generally speaking, a Pharisee would not correct a Sadducee, or a Sadducee wouldn't correct a Pharisee unless they were face to face and one was, asking for correction or needing correction because he's in front of a big crowd saying something he shouldn't be saying. But generally speaking, if they're talking about another Pharisee, it's a Pharisee doing it, a courtesy. All right, so anyway, the leavening of violence. They're talking about somebody goes in and they break into someone's house at night and they hold them at gunpoint and make them open up their safe and give them all their money and all that. That would be leavening, the leavening of his greed, not grief, greed. All right, so then it says dam, which is the word for blood. It comes from the idea of the redness of blood. It's really from the color of blood. Then it's zivhi, which is sacrifice me. So it's my sacrifice is the way we need to think of that. And that's just, the slaughtering of an animal. That's what the sacrifice is. Then it says below, it's the negative article, yalin, he stay. It's to pass the night, to lodge. Then it's chelev, that's abundance. They use that for the word for fat because the fat is the abundance. Because when you live in a place in a time where the only fat people around are the ones with lots of money, then their fat is from their abundance. That's where the whole idea comes from. Hagi, that's feast me, so we think of it as my feast. It's a feast, it's a festival. It's specifically used when they talk about Sukkot in the biblical text. Then we have Ad, which is to pass over. It's the passing of time. So usually it's the word till, T-I-L-L, or until. It's usually what you use. Then it says boker, and it could have been till, and we could have used that word here, until morning. Boker, that's the morning. We say boker tov, that's good morning. We say erev tov, that's good evening. And then we say shalom, and that's basically hello, goodbye, good afternoon. It has a lot of meaning. So, verse 18, do not offer the blood of Pesach, that's his sacrifice. So he's talking about Pesach, with leavened bread. And do not let the leftover of my feast remain until morning. And we've already had this. It's why we know, it's why we can see these idioms, because that's what this is. This is they're talking idiomatic. God is talking idiomatic to an idiomatic people, language. And so they've already laid it out very clearly that you don't offer blood with the Passover sacrifice, you don't eat leavened bread, and you don't leave the leftover until morning. That's why now they can say it a very different way, and we still know exactly what they're talking about. And now, because of this, we understand the idiom, the two that are used here. Do not offer the blood of my sacrifice. My sacrifice is the idiom for Pesach, with leavened bread, and do not let the leftover lamb, we can add lamb because we know that's the leftover, of my feast remain until the morning. Isn't that neat? Now you know how we get the understanding of the idioms in this idiomatic language. All right, so 19 in English very literally says, beginning with first fruits, dirts you shall bring house Yahweh, God's you not, you shall boil, kid and milk mother heat. All right, this is going to be a whopper, people, so hang on tight. It starts off with Roshit, beginning. You ever heard that before? Bereshit, in beginning. It's not, by the way, in the beginning. That would be Beha-Reshit. So take that out. It's in beginning. It would be more proper to say in a beginning. In a beginning, God created. Well, yeah, so there was a bunch of stuff before God created the heaven and the earth, like the Malachim that he created before we were created, and so on and so forth that we know because we've read the whole book. So yeah, that's a beginning. That's our human races, the beginning of the human race in that beginning, right? Anyway, so this says Roshi, beginning. It's they say it's of former times, it's of past times, because the beginning was a long time ago, right? If in fact it was a long time ago, because the beginning could have started yesterday, and that's not a long time ago. In humankind, that was quite a long time ago. Very often used of the first fruits offered in the temple. And that's exactly what they're going to say next. Bikure, with the first fruits, in the beginning of the first fruits. The first fruits of the grain, the first fruits gathered from the field and the trees, especially the first fruits offered to God. Remember, this stuff is written in agricultural terms, but that does not limit it to agricultural terms. These are simply the examples given. So if you're not in agriculture, which, think about it, back then everybody would not have been in agriculture. You had lawyers, they probably were not farmers. You had scribes who were definitely not farmers. I mean, they could have done it on their as a pastime thing, but they were scribes. That was their job. The high priest wouldn't have been a farmer. They had medical doctors all the way back to the beginning of the Jewish race and the Jewish people and all of that. So yeah, that probably wasn't a farmer. You had blacksmith, the beginnings of all of that. The people that worked in iron, they weren't necessarily what we think of. When I think of a blacksmith, I'm thinking of somebody with making a horseshoe and putting it on a horse, because that's kind of what they became in the 1800s in our world. But back then, they probably didn't do that. I don't know of horseshoes going back that far in history, but they would have made things out of metal that people needed, latches for gates, swords, things like that. Those guys wouldn't have been farmers. So you have to understand that you can't just say, well, this was all a farming community. No, it wasn't. There was mostly farmers, because mostly people had to farm the food they ate. And then whatever was left over, they could sell, so long as they left a certain portion of their field for the poor. So, anywho, you follow what I'm saying, I hope. Then it says, Ad Metaha, and literally that's dirts you, from your ground. That's what you really think of. It's the stuff you walk on, the stuff you till and you plant in. So it's the first stuff that comes out of the ground, your ground. And if your ground is metal, is blacksmithing, or is scribbling because you're a scribe, or whatever it is, that's your ground. Understand the idiomatic nature of the language. They're not talking just about literal dirt. So then it says, Tavi, you shall bring. It's to come, to enter, to go, to bring, to take. Remember, in their world, to go is to come, and to leave is to arrive. Same word for all of those things, because no matter where you're going, you arrived there, right? You came there. Anyway, there are languages to this day that still use it that way. All right, so you're going to bring it. This is in Hefil. It's to cause, to come in, to lead in, to bring in. So let's say that you deal in cattle. You don't actually farm, but you're a rancher. You're going to have to lead those animals in, right? But let's say you're a farmer and you got all these baskets of things, and you got them in your little uh, wagon, and you got your donkeys pulling it. You're still leading them in, especially if you're using donkeys. Get a tractor, man. But anyway, hopefully you understand what's being said there. Then it says bait. Okay, that's house. It's of a house, of a movable house. And when you live down here in well, we don't actually live in Tornado Alley, but we live close enough to it that every once in a while we're under threat. Doesn't matter how strong your house is a movable house. Those people down there in the hurricane areas, some of their houses were quite mobile. Saying mobile, they're not talking about a mobile home or destruction of a home. They're talking about a tent. Now, they use it of a royal house, of a palace, of a fortress, right? So lots of things can be your home. But generally speaking, in Hebrew, when they're talking bait, they're talking about a dwelling place, an abode, a place where a family lives, loves, and grows. That's truly the sense of the word bait. And then it says bait, the house of God. And it's not just saying God, it's not saying just any old God. It didn't say Elohim, leaving that open to any old you want to put in there. No, they gave the actual name of God. Then it says Elohecha, your God. Yahweh is your God. So do the people who serve a different God in a different temple have to do this? Not according to God's law. Maybe according to their God's law, but not according to God's law. This is a law that's made for Jews and them alone. Now, if you're going to take on the service, if you're going to claim their God as your God, yeah, you probably should do what he says, not your God. It's really that simple. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Then it says lo, which is the negative article, tevashel. Not you shall boil. You don't cook, don't put some water in a pot and make it boil, right? So what are you going to boil? Gedi, a young goat or even a sheep, because they were both considered the same animal in this time frame. By the way, over in the Middle East, they still consider goats and sheep the same animal. All right. Ba'chaleb, in milk. That's poetically, it's used. This word is used for someone's wealth. And there's a good example. God said he was going to take him to the land of milk and honey. So you see how it's of wealth, a land flowing with milk and honey. Anyway, then it says emo, its mother or his mother. So don't boil the kid in his mother's milk. Now, you have to understand, here's an idiom that's explained in the same sentence. Here's the translation. At the beginning of the first fruits of your ground, you will bring to them, you will bring them, I got the two in the wrong place. You will bring the, I read it in the wrong place. I typed it in the right place. You will bring them to the temple. The house of Yahweh is the temple, your God, and thus, you will not boil a kid in its mother's milk. There was no temple when this law was given. Onkelos felt that this was a prohibition against eating meat and milk together. Judaism has followed that to this day, never considering for one moment that this was a Hebrew idiom. 3 bullet points arise from the Babylonian Talmud in Holin 1b and in the Mechilta as well. The first bullet point, it is a prohibition against eating. The second, it's a prohibition against cooking. And the third, it's a prohibition against mixing meat and milk. Okay, so apparently God wasn't the God of the Jews. He was the God of the Greeks. He followed after Greek thinking and Greek cultures and customs, right? Because that's exactly what this is. They're getting this from what's his face? Who's the Greek guy? It's not Aristotle. Who? No. I can't think of his name. The big one. I can't think of his name. But anyway, he's the one that came up with the idea of the bullet points and breaking everything down into its smallest thing. Rashi and Rambam agreed that this prohibition was for the mixing of any and every kind of meat with milk. Cheese is made from milk, thus no cheeseburgers for Jews. The Sonsino Chumash said that boiling a kid in its mother's milk was customary among the nations surrounding Israel, but this is simply not true. It's just utterly made up. It is not true. Maimonides speculated that the reason why the Jews could not boil a kid in its mother's milk was because the Gentiles did so in some idol worship related ceremony, but he offered absolutely no proof. Casuto offered a single sentence from the Ugaritic tablet, which he translated to mean boil a kid in milk, a lamb in butter. That's all it said. One sentence that said boil a kid in milk, a lamb in butter. He went on to say that some Bedouins boil sheep in milk to this very day. The Ugaritic tablet makes no reference to mother's milk, none whatsoever. And the Bedouins, no doubt, picked up this tradition by hearing guys like Maimonides talking about it, if it happens at all. This may well be the worst case of blind leading the blinder that has ever existed among God's children. This prohibition appears 3 times in the Torah, and each time it is preceded by the explanation of this idiom. Clear as the nose on our faces that the words, "You will not boil a kid in its mother's milk," was an idiom contrasting against the command to bring your first fruits to the house of Yahweh, your God. If you don't bring your first fruit offering as soon as you get them, it is like boiling a kid in its mother's milk. God is the mother who gave the milk, and we are boiling ourselves in our own mother's milk by holding back our mother's provision. Do you get it? It's an idiom. Anyway, let's see, we have time. Let's move on to 20. Literally in English, it says, "Behold, I send messenger to faces you, to keep you in way and to make come you to the place that make established me." You can kind of understand that one, can't you? So it says, "Hine," behold. But this is a word that, when you say behold, when you're using this word, you're actually pointing at something. You're trying to get someone's attention on something very specific. Behold the picture. Oh, that's hard to do because the monitor makes it look opposite. Anyway, so you should be pointing something out. Then it says Anochi. That's the word for me, myself, and I. We say I, me, or myself because we have a lot of words that mean very little. They have the word Anochi. I can use it as I can use it as me, I can use it as myself. Because they're all the same thing, aren't they? All right, so then it says Sholeach. So it's behold, I send you. So basically it's when you say it, you're pointing towards something, right? I send you. It's to send anyone to do something. You send anyone. NPL, it's to send as God to send on anyone a plague or a calamity. How come everybody's always so negative? Why don't we say to send as in God to send blessings? Anyway, it's been just as easy. It means exactly the same thing. I'm just saying. All right. Then it says malach, malach, which is generally translated as angel. It's messenger. It's someone who's sent to dispute a claim, perhaps, to dispute an argument. One that's sent a messenger of God. I don't agree with it where it says an angel. I don't agree with that at all. That's Babylon. That has nothing to do with Judaism. And I'll get in a lot of trouble for that, but I just simply don't buy into it. It's of a prophet, of the priest, of the rabbis, the rabbim. They are the malach Yahweh. They are the messengers of God. They're the ones that bring his words to you. Okay, then it says lefaneha. So I just pressed a button I shouldn't have. Sorry about that. Lefaneha, to the faces of you. The face, the part that's facing you. It's from the root pana, which is to turn this way. Yeah, we've already had that. Then it says li shamar ha, to keep you. Shamar, to keep. It's of someone who guards, in a narrow sense of a gardener who takes care of the garden and takes away the weeds and cultivates the land and fertilizes the land, and does the harvest and all that. And in the wider sense is to preserve something, to keep it safe. So then it says ba darech, the way. Someone's going to keep you in the way. It's an act of going, of walking. It's a journey. The path. Someone's going to keep you on the right path. Think about it. It's the word that's used at the totality of your life, because whatever someone can sum up your life in, this was the guy who all he ever wanted to talk about was the Torah. Then that was the Torah was your path, right? It's the guy all he ever wanted to talk about was football. Your path. Just saying. Then the next word, velaha viaha, and to make come you, or to make bring you. I mean, you could say it either way. Come or bring. It means the same thing. Go or same thing. All of it means the same thing. To come, to enter. It's of a place. You went from there to here. You came from there to here. You walked from there to here. You go from there to here. Right? It's all exactly the same thing. Those are not bullet points. But it's in he feels, so it's to cause, to make someone do this, even if it's yourself. This is L, which is to, that's that noun that's indicative of motion, to turn, or. This is hamakom. That's the place. It's a place where someone stands. It's over there. So remember I said the hine, I'm pointing. So this is the speaker pointing to that specific place. This is asher. We would write W-H-I-C-H or T-H-A-T. So it's which or that. This is ha-kinoti, which I have established. You're going to go to the place which I have established. So now we know that the place that God is pointing to is Jerusalem. Well, you could go there, but you'd miss the point. The place that God wants you to go there is the Torah. Is the Torah the path? Of course it is. How do we know this? Because we read something that explained the idiom. Because we read that when the children of Israel decided to build a golden calf to follow all of God's law. So Moshe went up the mountain, spent 40 days chiseling it out into stone or watching God do it. It's the first time. And then he comes down that when they're completed, God tells him, you better stand back. I'm just going to wipe these people out. And he says, what? Because Moshe, he doesn't know everything like God does. He doesn't know what's going on. And God says, yeah, we probably should start all over. Moshe said, wait a minute. I don't like that. Let's not do that. And God granted his wish. As it says, he repented of the evil thing he decided to do. But what did God say that gives us the understanding of this? He said, the people have turned quickly from the way, the path. They had agreed to live by the Torah. And he said they turned quickly from it. Because the Torah says, don't be making graven images. And what did they do? They made graven images. The law says don't bow down and worship them. What were they doing? Bowing down and worshiping. So they had turned quickly from the Torah. So God's pointing to the Torah. Now, was it supposed to be in Jerusalem? Yes, it was. To this day, it's still supposed to be there. Is it? Yeah, part of it. I wouldn't go as far as to say all of it, because the vast majority of the Jews who live there do not believe in a God at all. They call themselves atheists. So It's not quite what it's supposed to be. But for the rest of us, follow the Torah. That is the path, regardless of where you are. So a translation of verse 20. Behold, I send a messenger before you to keep you in the Torah, in the way, who will bring you to the place which I have prepared. So if you live according to the Torah, God's messenger, the one who's teaching you the Torah, it will in fact lead you to the place that God has prepared. So if we live in America, does that mean we're all going to Israel? No. But if you live your life according to the way your messenger, your rabbi is your messenger. He's the one that teaches you Torah. At least he's supposed to be teaching you Torah. He will eventually lead you, in that. And if you live according to his way, you will come to the place that God has prepared for you. A place regardless of where it is. Even Ezra identifies the angel messenger as Michael. So again, that's the very heavily Christian / Persian influence there. I don't agree with it. Nachmanides felt it was the redeeming angel / messenger from Bereshit, or Genesis 48:16, which was actually God himself. I won't say I disagree with it. I won't exactly say I do agree with it, but I don't disagree with it, because I believe that God is the living Torah. I believe that the Torah is God's lifestyle that makes him the living Torah, right? So hard to argue with Nachmanides' assessment here. Casuto taught that, behold, I send a messenger before you, did not imply a being, such as an angel, distinct from God. In ancient Shemitic thought, there was no difference between the sender and the sent. In short, the messenger of God is simply God's actions. That's an interesting way of putting it. He points to Bereshit, or Genesis 24:7, in which Abraham tells his servant that a messenger, a malach, of the Lord would go before him. However, the story never speaks of an actual messenger, of an actual angel, if you will. Eventually, the servant declares that the Lord has led him in the way, the derek, thus making it clear that the messenger is the guidance given by God. Now we're getting back to the Torah, aren't we? It is the guidance given by God. Later, in verse 22, it is clear that the messenger of the Lord are the actions that God took in getting him there. So the actions that God takes in our life, if we're living according to the Torah, is us living a right lifestyle. And that's actually, they're attributing it to God's actions because they don't want to say it was the man's actions. They don't want to say the man just doing what God tells you to do was the result of your actions, which it is. If you live according to the Torah, those are your actions. But the reason why they didn't want to go there is because then people are going to start saying, see, you get into heaven through your actions. No. Without the action of God giving us the Torah, there would be no hope for anyone anywhere at any time, under any circumstances, right? So it is God's actions. Okay. So then verse 21, this is probably as far as we'll be able to go today, but we'll see. It says very literally in English, beware from faces his, is he, not you shall make bitter in he, for not bear to transgressions you, for name me in midst he. So understand that we're talking about the messenger. It says, he shamar, or mer, is the same thing. Beware, to keep watch. Shamar, to keep. It's of the guy that's plucking and all that stuff, to keep. But this is the side of things. The other keeping, plucking away the bad and helping the good and all that, that's a positive light. This is the negative light. Ooh, watch, be careful, keep your eyes open. That's the way they're using Shema here. Everything has a positive and a negative. Even Barach, which is to bow down, to bless, can also be used for the word curse. Because the opposite of God blessing you, the absolute opposite would be God cursing you, right? I mean, so that's like the ultimate insult, is to take the best thing that God can do to you and turn it into the worst thing, right? And it's the same way here. We have the positive of the keeping and tending and taking care of, to the, ooh, look out. And this is very common in a language where they use few words with lots of meaning. Then it says, mi panav, it's from faces his, because we're talking about beware of turning from his face, right? And then it says, U Shema, Shema Yisrael. Here, you got to, and remember in Hebrew, in Shema, I can't say something, I am thirsty. And then you just sit there and do nothing, and you can't claim that you heard me. Because you have to hear with the ears, which of course everybody should be hearing me say these things, right? Then you have to understand it with your whole heart and mind, because in the biblical days, the heart, the mind, the soul, the spirit, all of that was the same thing. It wasn't different bullet points for different things. It was just different words for the same thing, because they didn't like the monotony of saying the same words over and over and over and over again. So they used a lot of different words. That's the only time they did that. And it was generally for emphasis. So anyway, you had to hear with your whole heart. You had to understand it with your heart and mind. And then you had to act upon it. And that acting did not have to be positive. It could be negative. So you could say, well, if you're thirsty, get off your can and go in there and get you something to drink. That's a reaction, isn't it? Or you can get up and go get me something to drink. That's a reaction. There's all kinds of ways to react to it. But if you don't react to it, but also you have to know that in Judaism, the word Shema was more about to hear it, to understand it, and to obey it. The heavy emphasis on the obey. So that was the acting, was to obey the thing that you heard and understood. Then it says, the kolo. So what are you going to act on? You're going to obey in the voice, in his voice. Whatever he says, the things that he speaks, the words and the discourse and the teachings that come from his mouth, you need to obey them. You need to hear them with your ears. You need to understand them with your whole heart and mind. And if you don't, ask him to explain it better. Then once you get to that point, you need to obey it. You need to do what he's telling you to do, because he's telling you to live your life the way God lives his life. That cannot be bad. All right, so then it says all. Well, this is the word for not. Again, lo and all mean exactly the same thing. They don't use it in one part of this, lo in one part of the sentence to separate it from all in another, except that it's monotonous to say lo, 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 lo. So maybe they say lo, all, lo, all, lo, all. Less monotonous. Although I don't know how. Anyway, that sounded very monotonous to me. So anyway, but that's why they did it. There wasn't one that had one meaning and the other that had another. They both are the negative articles. So then this is tamer, which is you shall be bitter. So not you shall be bitter. I don't know what else to say. Bitter is bitter. We all know what that is. Then it says bo, and that's a sound alike, but this is actually just two Hebrew letters that they put together to say in he. This is key, which means for, because. This is low. Here's your negative article. So you see what's happening here. All low and nothing else. Then it says, ye saw. You shall not take up. You shall not lift up. You shall not bear up. What is it they're going to tell you not to do? Lefish achem. To transgressions you. It's defection. It's rebellion. A fault, a trespass, especially Torah rebellion, which is also called sin. Yes, sin is called Torah rebellion. Transgression against God. In other words, against the Torah. So if God said to do something you didn't, you transgressed the Torah, you transgressed against God. Then it says ki, which means for, because. Then it says shemi. So Shem. the name. It's used in anyone's name, but it's also of their authority. It's a celebrated name to make oneself a name for themselves, a good name, a good reputation. It really boils down to. I found this note somewhere. I don't remember where. I think in all places the Strong's Concordance. And again, I'll probably say this every time, but I do not endorse that book. For the time period that it was written in and the original work, it is impressive because he did it without a computer. So I think it's impressive what he did do. But for the most part, I say don't use it because it's obvious the man didn't speak Hebrew. He didn't even know the difference between a sheen and a seen, and he really messed his book up when he numbered it. Anyway, I think this is where I found this, though. It says, by usage, chiefly Hebraistic, the name is used for everything which the name covers, everything the thought or feeling of which is roused in the mind by mentioning, hearing, remembering. It's a very good explanation. In English is found a derivative of the usage of the word name, or shem, being used for authority. Stop in the name or authority of the law. The ancient Hebrew, that's pre-Hellenization, the Torah was the authority, the name of God. God only has one actual name. He doesn't have 79 or 150 or however many people come up with. Those are attributes. God, your provider. God, your protection. God, your peace. Those are God's attributes, not his name. He only has one, and we know it is Yahweh. And you guys know that I pronounce the word because I feel that not pronouncing it is taking his name in vain. You're making something that he gave to us go away, and that's to make it vain. So that's why I say God's name. And this is only, I'm saying it as close as we can possibly say it in this day and age. There is not a human being on this planet that knows how to say it the way it was said when Moshe was alive. No one. Because the Jews took God's name and erased it from history. And that's the truth. They took God's name to the ultimate vanity. So that's why I do it. But anyway, the point here that I'm trying to make with this word is that God's authority, God's name is the Torah. It is his authority over the lives of everybody, whether they agree with it or not, whether they believe in God or not. You are subject to God's laws, and God's laws are not limited to the 613 as it's put out by Maimonides and others. It's not limited to the thousands that are actually in the book, because Maimonides ignored and left out a lot of stuff, and then he doubled up on other stuff. Again, work, given the fact that he did not have a computer to keep all that straight. But he believed something, and he tried to make it true. And to this day, everybody's following that nonsensical way of thinking. What we need to do is go through every single law and count them up. We're going to find out there's way more than 613. It's nonsensical. Decided, what was it, the 900s, somebody said, yeah, I think that since God's name adds up to 613, the numerical value, there's probably only 613 laws in the Bible. He didn't know if it was true or not. He just threw it out there. And then in the 1100s, somebody came along and put it all out there. And then in the 1200s, Maimonides came along and redid it once again. And the two guys, their numbers don't match. But everybody went with Maimonides, even though he's Jew at best. And he didn't speak Hebrew, by the way. Nothing he ever wrote was written in Hebrew. There is a story in his book that talks about somebody complaining that something he wrote was in Hebrew and he had trouble understanding it. Maimonides writes back and says, well, Hebrew is really the best, and you just a little harder, you'll find that Hebrew is better. And then what's funny is in that very same story, in his book, he admits that he doesn't speak Hebrew at all, and he never wrote anything in Hebrew. So the story from Maimonides in his own book is a false story according to Maimonides. There you have it. Don't have a lot of love for Maimonides, and I know that's wrong for a Jewish rabbi to say, but I just don't. The guy was a liar. He knew he was a liar. And if you ever want to ask me about why I feel like he's a liar, just, be ready for a long-winded conversation because I can lay it out there. But anyway, for the purposes here, I'm trying to make you understand that the Torah is God's name, his authority. His name, as we think of in English, is Yahweh. His name, as we should think of in Hebrew, is the Torah. Then the next word here, and the last word, is Bekirbo, in the midst, he. That's the middle, so in the middle of him. Anyway, here's the translation into English. Verse 21, keep watch in his, that's the messenger's, presence, and obey his voice. You shall not grieve him, for he will not bear your transgressions, because my authority is in him. Of the words obey or accept his words, Onkelos and the Sadia changed the wording slightly in an attempt to avoid the idea that Yisrael would actually rebel against God or his messenger. Why? They did constantly. You had 10 years of following the Torah, followed by 20 years of not, followed by 7 years of following it, followed by 13 years of not. Have you not read the book? Why would they do this? I don't understand it. It's like the Christians making, or the Catholics, I should say, making people out to be superhuman. They never had a mistake. They never said anything wrong. And the Jews fall into this. They try to explain away Moshe being a murderer. They try to make it okay. Well, see, in his case, it wasn't really murder. It was, self-defense or whatever. He was protecting another man. No, Moshe committed murder. And they try to explain away David getting another man's wife pregnant and then trying to murder the man to cover it up. No, these people were people. They were human beings, and they were subject to the fallacies of being human beings. All of them. Let's not try to paint them into a picture that they don't belong in, because eventually those pictures fail, and people's belief and their hope and their trust in the Rabbim who teach them will fail. Stick with the truth. God is absolute truth. We don't have to paint a pretty picture. It just is what it is. All right. Then of the words, keep watch, take heed of him. The Sephono says this means that we shouldn't show the messenger disrespect. Okay, I don't disagree with that. I wouldn't have gone there, but I don't disagree with it. Of the words, he will not bear your transgressions, or he will not pardon. Rashi said the messenger was unaccustomed to sin. Again, like the Catholics, trying to make the messenger a superhuman or beyond human. Rashi said that he had no authority to pardon your transgressions. Onkelos recognized the idiom and wrote, lift your transgressions. In other words, pardon you. He will not pardon you. My authority is in him, or my name is in him. Rashi said, this means that whatever the messenger does, he does in the name of God. It's not exactly right, but it's not exactly wrong either. Casuto said the following, all the theological concepts that the expositors have attached to this passage with reference to the function of angels, their nature, and their relation to God and the like are completely foreign to the simple meaning of Scripture. And he's absolutely on the nail on that one. Of the words, my name is in him, onkelos, his Aramaic translation, for my name is in him. He wrote, for my name is in him. He added some words. Even though the scriptures say not to add to or take away from it, they all do. Casuto said the following, the connotation of the words, my name is in him, is in my glory. And the sense is, I myself reveal myself to you through him. And I and he. It's interesting. I kind of agree with it, and I'm a little leery of it at the same time. I know what he's basing it on, and it's certainly in Mesopotamia in the time of Moshe, and particularly going all the way back to Abraham. This was kind of the thing, and I get that. But what bothers me is when he gets into the "we are the same." On the one hand, then on the other hand, it doesn't. Here's what's going on. If I speak the words of Torah and I speak them in truth, and I'm not painting, trying to paint the Jews in a prettier light than they really were, which I won't do. I'm not going to apologize for Moshe being a murderer. I am not going to apologize for David being a womanizer and a murderer. I'm not going to do it. But I'm not going to belittle these men, because God chose these men and did great things through these men. And that shows the power of God to take the mess that we all are and turn it into something so far beyond any of us ever could possibly have dreamed or imagined. That's why I think we have to stick with the truth, right? Because if we take away the truth, we take away the good stuff with the bad stuff. You're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You cannot have it both ways. In that it's God's glory being revealed through the messenger. That happens only if the messenger is honest and true and sticks with the truth. So if I point you, I as just a regular human being, flawed as I am, and I am flawed, in that direction, then God will reveal himself through my words. And to that degree, I agree with Casuto. But if we take it to the, oh, well, that makes Robert the Mashiach, blah, 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 let's not go there, please. Don't ever do that to me. I'm probably not going to raise on the third day and all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? And there's probably never going to be any proof that lots of people were healed by my hands. That's probably never going to happen, because so far it hasn't. Although I'm willing to shake your head real hard and try. All right, we're out of time. Shalom, shalom, y'all. I guess I should